At the California State Railroad Museum. He's going to talk a little bit about some of the other types of equipment that ran down the V&T, from the CP and SP. So without any further ado, Kyle, thank you.
Let's see, is this one on? Where the switch? It says here somewhere on here that there should be an on-off switch, but that's the theory.
Stand closer to the mic.
Want to come light?
Yeah.
No.
Anybody home? Hey, we have liftoff. Okay, we'll see how I can coordinate one hand with a mic and one hand with a little advancer. So what I want to talk about is, let me step back here a little.
Take off backpack.
Yes. Settle in for the scene. Talk a little bit about some of the other cars that would have come onto the V&T. I'm going to do a review of some of the early freight cars for the Central Pacific and Southern Pacific lines. I'll talk a little bit to the side about cabooses, and then talk a little bit about some other types of cars that might have come up. For instance, different types of early refrigerator cars, a few of which we actually have records of coming onto the V&T, and then talk a little bit about some early tank cars, and then a little bit on little things like couplers and trucks and things like that. So if you've got questions, go ahead and holler out, and away we'll go. So freight cars on the Central and Southern Pacific, there are lots of different types of cars, and the cars evolved over time. I found this real interesting article, and no, there's a number of articles here, and no, I don't expect you to read them on the screen. I'm just putting them up there to let you know that they're out there. This is an article that was in the National Car Builder from about 1877, and it's by Ben Welch, who was the master car builder for the Southern Pacific, or Central Pacific at this point. And it's about using redwood in car construction, and it's a whole page article. So real interesting. They were using a lot of redwood on their cars out here. They were using Douglas fir for sills. So there was a very much of a California style or West Coast style using local woods. And they were being very effective, but redwood in particular had some little idiosyncrasies on getting paint to adhere to it that Welch talks about also.
What year was that journal?
I'm not sure. I've got the volume. It's
Yeah, it's got the volume up.
yeah, it's volume 3 of the National Car Builder, and I'm just not sure how their numbering goes. It started in 1876, so this is either, but I don't know whether they're having 2 volumes a year or 1 volume a year at this point. So it's somewhere between 77 and 78. And I went trying to find the year and couldn't find an online version of this. I made this photocopy a number of years ago from an original, and unfortunately didn't note down the year. So we'll track that down at some point. I just found this sort of at the last minute and threw it in because I thought it was very interesting. And I would expect that the V&T might have made use of some of the local woods too, West Coast woods. So the very early boxcars on the Central Pacific, one of the interesting things to note is that the sheet metal roof, the tin roofs on these cars, the earliest cars were 25-foot cars, and then they upped it to 28-foot cars. There were a number of Southern Pacific diagrams for different cars. The upper car is a 25-foot car, so this would be from the mid to late 1860s, and I believe they stretched that to 28-foot before promontory. So the 25-foot cars are very early. They then standardized on 28-foot cars and used those into the 1880s. Here are a few pictures. These cars were actually built in the 1880s, 24-foot cars in the upper view. I think they're both 24-foot cars. The one on the right here is certainly a 24-foot car. The other one has a Wagner plug door, and it might be a 34-foot car. So they also occasionally, in this picture here, it's a standard car, but it's got advertising on it. But it's a Central Pacific car, a Southern Pacific car. And on the original photo, I was actually able to pull off the numbering, but it's got quite an advertising for a furniture company that apparently contracted to haul stuff on the railroad. As I say, in the 1880s, they also started building 34-foot cars like this upper one and the one down at the lower left. There were also several fast freight lines. In the 1860s and 70s and 80s, there was a big boom in fast freight lines, which different railroads would form as subsidiaries that would be give special extra fast service. And a group of railroads in the Midwest and out to the coast, including the Union Pacific and Central Pacific, formed the California Fast Freight Line. And so a lot of equipment is lettered for that, not only on the Central Pacific and the Union Pacific, but also several of the roads out of Chicago. Chicago Northwestern was a member of that. I think the Burlington was a member of that. And a couple of the St. Paul Road may have been a member of that. Rock Island. So there's a whole group of roads that went together to form the fast freight line. And the way that they would do that is that each road would assign certain of their cars to that operation, but the cars still belonged to the individual railroads. So it was, they were individually owned and then assigned to the fast freight line. The fast freight line didn't actually own the cars themselves.
Kyle, was that mostly LCL and freight forwarding? That freight?
A lot of that, and merchandise in general, yeah. But they would schedule things coast to coast, so they would they were advertising the fast freight line, you know, for shipment from Boston or New York to the west. But it was LCL, but also more general merchandising. So it could be whole car loads too. One of the other interesting cars that the CP used as standard throughout the 19th century was the combination car. And these cars are interesting because these are not only box cars or cars for fruit and things like that, they're also stock cars. So you can well imagine what the load of strawberries might be like that followed the load of pigs, for instance. You can't hose it all out. But as you can see, even fairly early, this is a photo that was taken in about 1869, and it's before the railroad bridge is. This is the old wagon bridge in Sacramento. So this is probably the summer of 69, and already there are combination cars on the Central Pacific. It's a form that was used by other railroads also. So there are a number of railroads. There's a really nice Railroad Gazette drawing from the Burlington of one of their combination cars from the 1870s. It was a way of getting a multi-purpose car. They cost a little bit more to make, but they were very flexible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Would that prior photo of the combination car, I assume that would be a 25-footer?
It may well be, and I'm not sure, because I think, like I say, I think they adopted 28 feet shortly before Promontory, but right around there. But they built 25-footers also.
Okay, so the ones that might have been let out at Reno to come for the V&T to pick up in the 70s, it could have been 28, or it could have been some old 25.
Yeah, because they were still in service. We have Central Pacific equipment rosters published by the railroad in 1875 and 1878, and they're still listing 25-foot cars as well as 28-foot cars. As I say, the CP used variations on that. The upper cars there are a couple of the outside single sheath cars, and in fact, this is from the same time period that the V&T cars are built, because the doors are 2-panel doors. They subsequently went to 3-panel doors, even on some of the outside race cars. But these are early Central Pacific. This is in Sacramento, this photo here. But with the 2-panel doors, which is what the V&T cars were. The lower photo here is taken down in Monterey, probably about 1880 or 81, shortly after the line was standard gauge down there. We have several different contemporary drawings of these cars. This was in a French publication, and it shows one of the CP cars, complete with the, oops, let's go back here, try that, with the California truck, which is the truck that was also used on the V&T cars, and V&T copied that design on a lot of the Detroit flat cars also. But it is 3-panel doors instead of 2-panel doors. It's a single sheath car or a double sheath car, smooth outside. We also have this drawing out of, I believe this is out of the National Car Builder. And again, a double sheathed car, but here we have the heavy Thielsen trucks. So this would be early 1880s. This is probably mid-1870s. So the design continues to evolve some. Nice details on the trucks also. I'll talk a little bit more about trucks later. Again, this is in Sacramento, a double sheath car, a single sheath car, and then one of the really early CP box cars. They even built some 34-foot combination cars that you start showing up. This is Oregonian, and this would be about 1889, I believe, is when that one is. This is a view up on the Sierra Nevada Wooden Lumber Company, and as I recall, that's the J.W. Bowker pushing the car around. This is a fruit special. In the late 1880s, there was a special solid fruit block at a high speed, on a high-speed schedule. They took a couple of different photos. I think we'll see this again, but in the train, there's a series of these combination cars included in the fruit train. A variety of models. Silver Crash has made a series of epoxy kits. Unfortunately, they do limited runs, and when they're done, they're done. But they did make the 25-foot car as well as 28-foot car. So this was the 25-foot car. This is the 28-foot car that was produced. And of course, Rio Grande Models makes the V&T car, which is also a Central Pacific car. And again, the diagram of the outside race car here with the 3-panel doors. The Mantua cars with a bit of work can be made into reasonable models. There's an article online about lowering the cars so that they don't sit quite so high on the trucks that give a better appearance, and also changing the trucks out from these ersatz passenger trucks into a freight truck. They've also made some of the 34-foot cars, a little bit longer, with the Wagner plug door up here. Very early plug door design that Southern Pacific adopted fairly widely in the late 1880s and 1890s. AHC and AHM and IHC has imported or brought in some plastic models that actually match another slightly later 34-foot car. These cars probably date from the very late 1880s and into the 1890s. Flat cars. The Central Pacific stuck with a fairly archaic design on flat cars fairly late before they finally transitioned. One of the characteristics of the early cars is that the insill is captured between the side sills instead of the insill capping the side sills, as is more common and considered better practice. But the CP, you'll see the insills projecting out at the ends, and this is a fairly distinctive feature of the CP cars. The other thing is that they actually used strap material for this outside truss, and there's a little support between the needle beams to help hold it in space. I'm not sure how you adjust the tension on these, but the strap actually bolts into the side sill. It doesn't travel all the way through. I believe that there are some intermediate truss rods that go the length of the car also on this design. So here's a drawing of one of these cars. Again, you can see the insill captured between the side sills in this drawing, and the strap coming across. Again, these are heavy Thielsen trucks, so these are probably early 1880s. In fact, the article, as I recall, is about 1892. National Car Builder again. 84? Okay. Thank you. I'm reading it at an angle. I like this photo because while it has been converted into a flanger, it shows great detail about the construction of the flat car. And again, when you look closely, you'll see that this is strap material and it's bolted to the side sill right in front of the bolster. So the bolster's here and that strap is bolted in right here, right in front of it. And then, as I say, I believe that they've got some intermediate truss rods that run the length of the car. And then this is, again, is the California truck, which the V&T also copied. Drawings of some of the early cars. Flat cars for a long time were standardized at 30 foot, not 25, not 28 foot, but 30 foot. And they built those quite late. And again, the side sills capturing the insill. California truck here. This is the earlier Central Pacific Standard truck. The V&T also copied this truck design, so we have surviving samples of that. A wood rack car with Thielsen trucks on it, and then they finally modified their design and went to the more conventional where the side sill butts into the insill, so the insill goes all the way across in these later cars. This 34-foot car here. So in the mid-1880s, they changed their standard. Fruit cars. There are a number of different fruit cars that the railroad produced. And very early, here you can see in 1869, they're already building fruit cars with invents in their design. Of course, one of the interesting things, I put up this nice picture of this fancy fruit train, but these are all Union Pacific cars, not Central Pacific cars, although they're California fast fruit. And the locomotive, incidentally, is the number 18 is rebuilt in the shop. This is the prototype for the mid-1880s Stevens locomotives with the straight boiler, but this is an early extended wagon top. Again, diagram of the 30-foot fruit car with the invents. This is with the vents open. They also built them with shutters that they could close them. There's also some internal controls that close them up. But fairly quickly they moved from having the vents always exposed to having some outside shutters that could close those off also. Then they transitioned from the 30-foot cars into the 34-foot cars. They also made passenger versions of these cars where they would have passenger trucks, and they would have, in the early days, platforms with Miller hook couplers so they could operate in passenger trains. But it's the same 34-foot car with the in shutters and the vents behind that. They just added the platforms on. Later, when they converted to Janney couplers, they took these same cars, took the platform off, and then just installed the Janney coupler. And there's some well-known photos of those, which we'll see shortly. This is a nice drawing. This one is out of, again, the National Car Builder. A similar drawing is also in the 1884 and 1888 Car Builder's Dictionary. For reference, the 1888 Car Builder's Dictionary is a complete reprint of the 1884 Car Builder's Dictionary. They just did a new edition of it. Yep. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Let's see, there we go. So, here is the passenger version with the platforms taken off and with the Janney coupler in place of the earlier Miller coupler. I might specify I'm using Janney as a generic knuckle coupler name. I don't know that these specifically are Janney couplers. I'm not sure who made the Central Pacific couplers. They use several different types. I know for one thing there was a California coupler, which was a particular design that there's an example on one of the boxcar bodies that's in SRM, the California coupler.
By 1900, I think their MCB had approved 48 designs.
Okay, yeah, there are a lot, they've standardized the design for knuckle couplers, and so there's lots and lots and lots of different companies that are making couplers, and the latching mechanisms is what they patent, but they're all interchangeable in terms of operation. The cars can couple to each other completely. And again, this nice drawing, Dave Joslin redrew this based on historical information he had access to in the SP files. This is one of the fruit cars with the Miller platforms and the passenger trucks. There's this wonderful advertising card for W.R. Strong, a fruit produce shipper, but it shows one of the cars complete with the invents and the platforms and all. Other companies also had very similar cars. Here's a Rio Grande car that is strikingly similar to the Central Pacific cars, and a diagram for some. And some of these are built by Peninsular Car Works for the Rio Grande and other companies. So it's a design that spreads around. And we have other examples of railroad sharing designs around. The immigrant sleeping car was something that was developed by Central Pacific, and they immediately shared it with the other companies. So Union Pacific, Santa Fe, Northern Pacific, all these folks built cars, the immigrant sleeping cars, with the same Central Pacific design. They specifically didn't patent the design so it could be shared around. This is a narrow gauge fruit car, a little bit different design, but again, we've got some of the invents, and then you've got some roof ventilators here, and an early refrigerator car coupled with, this is on Marshall Pass. Northern Pacific had a slightly different variety, but again, the end platforms with the Miller platforms for their fruit cars. Here's a Santa Fe fruit car, a little bit different design, but again, the invents for fruit service. So cabooses, I want to talk briefly about cabooses. This is a photo of the earliest style Central Pacific caboose. and it's a boxcar with a seat up on the roof and a brake staff that runs up through the car so that you can tie the brakes down from the seat here. And they use that fairly extensively. This photo is from late 1869 or mid 1869 in front of the Central Pacific Depot in Sacramento. This is in bloomer cut on a wood train, and again you can see some of the details of this platform. By the early 1870s, they were building cabooses with cupolas, as we'll see, but this design also sticks around fairly late. This is a 1907 fire in Sacramento, oil tanks burning, and here right in the foreground are a couple of these cars with a upgraded version. They've got cross braces now so that the things are a little more stable, but it's the same basic design, still in the caboose string here on the caboose track there in Sacramento. So just a boxcar conversion. They also did more formal conversions where they took boxcars and literally added a cupola onto it. Then they had a standard series where they actually converted it, took the side door out, and made it more of a caboose, but it was, again, the basic boxcar body that they were using as the starting point for the conversions. This is the earliest, what we would identify as a conventional caboose. This is 1872. This, I believe, is the first one of this series that was built. This basic design with modifications continues, and you can trace the evolution clear up to the late 1930s steel cupola cabooses, which have an obvious descent in evolution through a series of designs. Here's another photo. On this, note that there's passenger-style trucks on this car. And here, you've got the freight-style swing-motion trucks, the California truck. But the caboose is basically the same, a standard design cupola, side door, and windows. This design evolves, continuing on. There's an immigrant train in Palisade Canyon. Again, the caboose at the end with the cupola. By the 1890s, they've got a standardized design. They've changed the cupola, so it's a higher design, but it's still very much, you can recognize the basic 1872 car in this design. We're fortunate to have drawings, detailed drawings of the 1890s version of the car. This particular one, they've eliminated the side door by 1898. When this drawing was made, but it's still the basic car. The interior arrangement has very little changed. I also noted this thing, in 1883 they changed their caboose color from yellow to bright metallic. Metallic would be the boxcar red that we know and love, or the Central Pacific version of that, which in the mix included a fair portion of clay in the paint, in the formula. Glenguera Mullet River Models makes a 1/4" scale model of the standard CS15 caboose, again without the side door, with the 1890s cupola. He doesn't have Central Pacific trucks, but he has these nice Chicago Northwestern trucks that are really close and have a pedestal that is similar to some of the later Central Pacific pedestals that were used, that could be used under the car if you didn't want to put freight trucks under it. He includes the interior, the little stepped platform up here for the conductor's base. Here's a nice interior view from the 1890s of a Southern Pacific caboose. And again, you can see this platform here with the steps up, and then the other cupola area, classic arrangement, the stove out somewhat towards the middle of the car. They haven't put it up against the wall yet. Pull down berths so the crews have a sleeping space. The cabooses in the 19th century were also used to carry passengers in third-class passenger service on the freight trains. And so the Central Pacific in the 1870s produced this long caboose that actually had more passenger space for secondary trains. But the interior arrangement, once again, is the same as in the standard cabooses that they have. It has the standard cupola that they're using in the 1870s. So this drawing is a contemporary Central Pacific drawing, and gives a lot of details of the standard cabooses as well as of these long cabooses. Oops, let me back up here. Again, this is down in Monterey. I'll note in passing this car right here, there's two cars here, but this car is a half flat car, half combination car, and this was designed for carrying carriages and all, where you could have the carriage here and you could have the horse carried in here. This particular car with this caboose had been assigned over for Carlton Watkins on a trip down to Monterey. So his photographer's wagon rode here with the horses here so that when he got to his destination he could unload them and get around there in Monterey. Again, oops, hitting the wrong button. Train going through Stockton in the late 1870s, again the long caboose. And looks like a 25-foot boxcar. See, it's also a little bit lower. So you get varying boxcar heights as well as lengths over time. Interesting thing about the little bobber cabooses that the Central Pacific started building in the late 1870s. There had been published drawings of a Pennsylvania Railroad standard bobber caboose that was in the trade press. And the Central Pacific apparently liked the design. So they copied the design, complete, even down to some little idiosyncratic details. So for instance, there are markers built into the side and offset. You see this one's lower than this one. They're built into the side of the car, they're positioned so that you can see from either direction. That's an element of the Pennsylvania Railroad original design. Central Pacific copied it on these cabooses. These cabooses are the only cars on the Central Pacific that use that design. It shows how faithfully they copied the Pennsylvania design for these bobber cabooses. It literally is a Pennsy caboose on the Central Pacific, built by the Central Pacific in the shops. Here's a picture. The earliest Pennsylvania did not have an roof overhang over the platform. So you can see here, no roof overhang, and then they modified it with a roof overhang. This is the version that the Central Pacific copied. But the other thing is, you can see in these diagrams, they've done away with the center windows. But in the original photo, they have the center windows, and the Central Pacific cars have the center windows also. But they copied the whole undercarriage and everything. It literally is a complete copy. Ed Workman did some really wonderful drawings of the Central Pacific car, doing up all the details. Here are some photos of the car. This is mid-1870s J.J. Riley photo. Again, another immigrant train. You'll note the immigrant cars are commonly coupled to freight trains, not on other passenger trains as commonly. And so you have a caboose at the rear end because it's a freight train. I'll also note that the cupola on these cars, again, copies the Pennsy design. It's not the standard Central Pacific cupola, it's the Pennsy cupola. Some of these got sold to secondary owners. This is an early McLeod car. The center window has been blanked over, but it still has the original cupola. This car was the very last bobber caboose on the Central Pacific. It was sold in 1909 to the Sugar Pine Railway, which you might know as Pickering Lumber Company. So here's a picture of it in the 1930s. You can see the center window just blanked over. It has an 1890s style cupola because they did upgrade some of these cars with the higher cupola. But this car is a really intact car. This also forms the very basic design for, or the inspiration for the later Pickering cabooses, although in other details they do not copy this car. This car was probably scrapped in the late 30s and replaced with a new number 1. Bachmann used to make a bobber caboose with the 3 windows. The underframe's a little rough, but it could be the basis for converting. The current Bachmann bobber caboose is a different body, but there are a number of these older bodies that are around that can be found on the market if you wanted to try and convert that into a Central Pacific bobber caboose. So at this point, I'd like to leave Central Pacific directly and go into some of the other types of cars that were out on the railroad in interchange service. This is a really early refrigerator car, the Fisher patent, patented in 1865. But you can see they've got it lettered New York and California refrigerator. It's in through service. So quite conceivably, one of these cars might have an occasion to trundle down the V&T in those very early years after the connection is made at Reno. Central Pacific built some early refrigerator cars in very limited numbers. Ultimately, they stuck for many years with the ventilated fruit car instead of the refrigerator car, but they did experimentally build a few refrigerator cars of different designs to try them out. This article, or a series of articles, talks about the Booth patent car, building it and trying it. Some are successful, some are not successful. This article talks about some other cars that arrived. A Booth car produce didn't quite make it. On other trips they did make it, so it's real variable on how well these cars perform in these early years. This is the patent papers for the Booth refrigerator car and how it's laid out. So far, I don't have a better illustration of the car that I can identify as a Booth to show you, but at least this will give you some idea of what they're doing with that design. The Davis refrigerator, another very early design. Again, an article about shipping fruit from California with the Davis refrigerator car. This early builder's photo from Harlan and Hollingsworth in a catalog that a friend of mine has. This is actually just a Xerox copy of it, but a very early refrigerator based on the patent date and other things. I believe it actually is a Miller patented refrigerator car. The Miller patents generally relate to refrigerators as opposed to refrigerator cars, but it probably got applied to the car. And then here is a written description from the Pacific Rural Press of the Miller car. So we have some descriptions of it. The Ayers car was a fairly successful early car. This is an article that actually one of the Ayers cars from the Burlington delivering stuff to Virginia City. So clearly some of these cars actually came over the V&T. We have documents of that. I believe we also had some documents of some Tiffany cars coming onto the V&T that we know came. But this is the General Ayers car. Part of their design was using a rubber insulating layer between the siding to isolate the car and separate the car and keep air inside or outside. Some very nice drawings. This is from the Railroad Gazette. There's also drawings in the 1884 and 1888 car builders, I believe. So really nice drawings of the car, and a nice article, another description of the car. And here are some of the patents. Ayers, there are a number of patents, as you can see, that relate to these cars, a whole cluster of them. So here are a few examples of some of the patent papers for these cars. California Fruit and Meat Shipping Company, Western Refrigerator Car Company, organized in San Francisco, but has participation from a Reno meat merchant. So they're using these cars primarily for transporting meat. There's some nice descriptions. The company apparently used Tiffany cars. This is the earliest Tiffany patent, but fairly quickly the upper cupola here is eliminated in the design, then incorporates the ice bunk into the roof itself along this line, along these lines here. So these are illustrations of some of the early Tiffany cars. Interestingly, there's the New Zealand legislature was doing a study on cars, and they specifically looked at the cars that were being built for this company. And so they have an extended description of these cars, and they also included this drawing as representative of the car, which is how I knew that it was a Tiffany. So there's quite a bit of stuff, and this is available online. You can actually find it online. They don't identify it specifically as a Tiffany other than this illustration. They just describe the car in some detail. Interestingly enough, the company apparently didn't last very long, so one of the principals, W.S. Bailey, and a couple of his associates acquire the assets and the cars and keeps shipping. Central Pacific does this really nice diagram of W.S. Bailey's car, which through contextual things I understand to be a Tiffany car. So we actually have a drawing of this. This guy is a meat merchant, a butcher, operating in Reno and also up in Virginia City. So it seems very likely that these cars actually made it over the V&T on occasions. Apparently, the Central Pacific also built a couple of experimental Tiffany cars themselves in the 1870s. This article describes it, and contextually, again, appears to be a Tiffany car, probably very much like Bailey's car. Boca Brewing Company, this wonderful photo, and they're shipping beer all across. They're shipping it to San Francisco, they're shipping it to Salt Lake City. Apparently in the Mormon capital, there's quite a market for beer. And I don't know where the church was on that in the 1870s, whether or not alcohol was considered inappropriate at that time. But they weren't all Mormons in the Salt Lake City at that point.
Paul was there then.
Yeah. But it's a wonderful car. There is lettering available for this car. Let me go back. From Griffin, you can get HO scale lettering. You can build your own car. We don't know for sure what type of car it was. I suspect it might be an Ayers car, or it might be a Zimmerman car. One of the characteristics is the sliding door that covers over the swinging refrigerator doors. So it's a double door design in both of these. And that seems to be on the Boca beer car also. I tend to guess that it might be an Ayers car, but it might not be. I don't know. The Central Pacific worked with the Boca Brewery so that they could have favorable freight rates because they're shipping all their material in and then shipping their product out, and they're pricing it so that Boca beer can be competitive in San Francisco against local brewers in San Francisco. And there's a whole railroad commission questioning about this, and the point of the exercise is Central Pacific is interested in encouraging this shipper because all of their raw material has to be shipped in, their produce is shipped out, and CP is interested in the business and is willing to work with them to help facilitate that business. Boca Brewery burned in 1893. The brewery burned. It was not rebuilt. They were already losing some of their market share to competition. These are examples of some of the competition. Anheuser-Busch, Schlitz, Miller were already shipping beer to San Francisco in the 1870s and 1880s, and apparently were competing fairly successfully in those markets. And so Boca, when the brewery burned down, they chose not to rebuild it because they could see the writing on the wall that their days were already numbered. The Hutchins refrigerator car is a really interesting design. It's a flat roof car. It doesn't have a peak, but it has an arch in it. Early Hutchins was also involved in the California Fruit Transportation Company, and a number of those refrigerator cars were in California Fruit Service. In the later years, some of these cars were sold to the German-American Provision Company, German-American Refrigerator Line. German-American becomes General American. This is the origins of GATX that's still with us today. But they date back, apparently in the 1915, 1916 period, things German were not considered to be particularly popular in the United States, and German American Car Company changed their name to General American Car Company at that time, and has remained General American ever since. Jacob Dold also bought some of these cars. Again, the flat roof Hutchins design. Here are some of the patent papers for the design. You can see it truly is flat across with an arch in it. Initially they arched the floor. Later they think better of it. The floor is flat, but the roof is still arched, or maybe peaked in the center here. Refrigerator hatches are spaced along the roof. The ice bunker is in the roof. You can see the hatches there. Some more patent papers. They add more hatches along the roof, several different variations. So instead of putting paired roof, hatches across, they put them linearly and down the center line. We have a couple of photos of these cars in somewhat less than favorable conditions. Compression forces are really interesting with wooden cars when the front of the locomotive stops and the back of the train keeps going. And you get all kinds of carnage, shall we say. The hammerhand design, they're trying to be more efficient. They put the ice bunker in the center with two separate compartments. In modeling circles, the Colorado Midland car is very popular, very well known. Here's two versions of a builder's photo of the first one, and then a sister car on the Colorado Midland. And Santa Fe also operated some of these, as did some other companies. For a period of time, Colorado Midland was a subsidiary of Santa Fe, and I suspect there's a relationship there why both companies are using these cars. Here's the patent papers for the hammerhead design. Again, the center ice bunk, and then the two compartments. Again, wrecks are a great source of pictures for freight cars because they're photographing the wreck and what should be in the wreck, but a few of these hammerhand style cars. The Wix design came in, was a fairly successful design and widely used. So here are some of the patent papers for Wix. A nice photo of a Santa Fe Wix car that was built by Pullman, and then these nice drawings of the car builder's dictionary from the 1895 and 98. Again, the 1898 car builder's dictionary is a reprint of the 1895 edition, so all the drawings and things are the same in those two. Thielsen type trucks, a variant on these. There are a lot of different minor variants of Thielsen trucks that capture the basic design but were licensed from Thielsen to be produced. By the early 90s, SP is again experimenting with refrigerator cars. They build a group of these cars in '92 in the shops. They purchased these cars from Ensign Manufacturing Company, Canada patented design in '94. There's a group of these that are built. Again, a builder's photo and some nice drawings.
What color is that?
Gray. I'm going to guess that it's a reefer yellow of some stripe. There are some other versions of this picture that are a little bit lighter. This is a copy of the builder's photo from American Car and Foundry. Ensign